Last but not least, we have our fifth and final category, which is space and global data. Very excited for this one. So then we have four presenters here today. Just a quick introduction to each of them. We have Planet. Planet is securing the food supply chain with Earth observation satellites and AI. Second, Geospark Analytics, Hyperion AI-enabled threat intelligence platform. Third, we have Fraym. They are AI-generated population data for enhanced decision-making. And fourth and final, we have Microsoft. They have a project enabling AI and data-driven precision agriculture with Farmbeats. And so let's get into it. Planet, passing it over to you to start off with your lightning talk.
Thanks so much. Okay, for folks that aren't familiar with Planet, Planet is an Earth observation satellite and data company with the mission of imaging the whole world every day to make change visible, accessible, and actionable. And we do this through a set of 2 constellations of satellites. The one that we're probably most well known for is our PlanetScope constellation, which is made up of 3U CubeSats that basically act like a giant line scanner. And so anytime they're flying over land, they're doing a background scan of the entire world every day at 3 to 5 meter resolution in the visible and the near infrared wavelengths. Then we have a second constellation of more traditional small sats called SkySat. There's 21 of those, and they do 50 centimeter targeted tasking around the world. Today, we're mostly going to focus on the PlanetScope satellites because for machine learning purposes, this daily global imaging provides an unprecedented training data set for machine learning applications. By doing this background scan of the world, we've acquired an average of 2,000 images over any given location on the planet. And this deep stack of imagery provides an ample training data set for applications like object detection, change detection, anomaly detection in particular, because you have so much data, you can figure out what the norms are versus the anomalies. And also combining satellite imagery with contemporaneous ground-based data in novel ways, because you can go and pull an image from the satellite taken on the same or approximately the same day as whatever ground-based data source you might want to be looking at and combine it through something like a random forest regressor, for example. And since this PlanetScope constellation is always on, you never have to task any specific imagery, which means the data is always there where and when you need it. And a really fantastic example of this recently is work by NASA Harvest, which is the food security arm of NASA run out of the University of Maryland. So NASA Harvest was approached by the government of Ukraine through their Ministry of Agriculture to help them understand the impacts of the war from a food security standpoint. Ukraine is critical because it provides 46% of the sunflower oil, 9% of the wheat, 17% of the barley, and 12% of the corn that is supplied to the world market. But the Russian blockades are preventing Ukraine not only from exporting a lot of these goods, but it's also damaging agricultural infrastructure and farmland across the country. So Harvest analyzed something that we offer called PlanetScope base maps during the planting and harvesting seasons across 2020, 2021, and 2022 to look for anomalies in those dates caused by the war. And they utilized a biweekly surface reflectance base map, which is generated from our best quality cloud-free images. So we make a mosaic over huge areas, in this case, the entire country of Ukraine, for specific 14-day moving windows. And having access to these base maps from the previous growing seasons was really critical to understand the expected patterns of planting and harvesting over time across the country and to see where those patterns had been disrupted in 2022 from the war. And by combining a machine learning approach to do this crop detection and determine the planting and harvesting dates, combined with ground-based data on land occupation from the Institute for the Study of War and the American Enterprise Institute's Critical Threats Project, they determined that 22% of Ukraine's farmland, including 28% of winter crops and 18% of summer crops, is currently under Russian control. And this type of analysis would not have been possible without having that daily background scan of data, because there's no way in 2020 Harvest could have expected that they would need this data in 2022. So if you had to manually acquire these base maps on a project by project basis, you wouldn't necessarily have access to historical data that you would need to do this kind of work. And if we look at what this looks like visually, This is an animation of the day-to-day scenes over part of summer over Ukraine in 2021. So you can see there's a lot of seams between images because there are a lot of separate PlanetScope scenes that we take every single day, over 4 million images a day. And then clouds also getting in the way, which is not something we can control. But if we look at the base maps product, we can go through and pick out the cloud-free images over those 2-week periods, and it removes a lot of the noise. So you can actually get down to seeing the changes on the ground that you're the most interested in. And when you're doing analyses over areas that require multiple PlanetScope scenes, it's a lot more helpful to have these cloud-free, gap-free mosaics so that you don't have to worry about the variations over time. So if you're interested in learning more about Planet data for AI applications, or you want to see some other examples of this kind of work being done with our data, don't hesitate to reach out. And thanks everybody for your time today.
Thank you, Tanya, for sharing about Planet. So then next up, our second lightning talk for this category is going to be Geospark, presenting an analytics Hyperion AI platform.
All right, thanks, Sabrina. I'm John Gilgasian. I'm the President and Chief Growth Officer here at Geospark Analytics. And this afternoon, I want to walk you through a quick understanding of who we are as a company and a short demonstration of our platform. So as I mentioned, we're Geospark Analytics. What we do is we built an AI-driven platform that automates threat and risk assessments globally. Really what that does, it gathers information from around the globe, both long-term and short-term data, about 7 million data sources in total, primarily news and social media, but we also do things like streaming economics and weather information, both short-term and long-term data. We've applied a series of algorithms to that do things like categorize information into event classes, such as unrest and conflict and things like disease outbreak. And we're going to focus on a disease outbreak during the demonstration today. We've also built algorithms on top of that that identify anomalies and activities globally. And then in addition just to saying something's happening in a place, we built a neural net that assesses how those things that are happening in every location on the globe impact the risk and stability level and security level for every country in the world, 8,000 regions and 1,200 cities. Who uses us today? We have both commercial and government organizations. On the commercial side, Fortune 500 companies and their chief security, chief risk officers. On the government side, pretty broad-based use. We've won a series of small business innovation research awards. And about 2 years ago, we converted one of those into a phase 3 IDIQ, CIBR IDIQ award for 5 years and $95 million. So we have implementations today in the Defense Department, in the intelligence community, in federal civil organizations, including the use of our health models and things like that. I'm going to show you at places like Health and Human Services and FEMA. I'm going to shift over to the platform real quick to walk you through a quick demonstration. This is our system, Hyperion. What you're seeing at a high level is the color coding of the countries and the current risk levels of those countries. And those things that look like bullseyes are what we call hotspots. Those are the activity anomalies. But for today, really what I want to focus in on is the health anomaly events. So we gather all the information globally from news and social and all those other things, and we built those algorithms to categorize them into different events, really to help people understand what's happening around the globe in different areas. These can be, again, categorized real quickly, searchable, discoverable, and I've done real quick is built a search about something called tomato fever. I've never heard of it either, but it's a recent outbreak that is happening in part of India that is driving, a risk and stability changes in the area to really understand how those health events are affecting things. Again, we can bring back out to the main information that's there, showing that it's a variant of monkeypox and COVID, but this tomato fever is even more contagious than those. In addition to saying, hey, these things are happening around the globe, what I can also do is shift from showing the entire country of India to really only focus on the regional areas in India as well, and how those areas are being affected by things like disease outbreak. So what I've clicked on real quick is something that we call Scribe, that is writing an AI-driven risk report, saying what's happening in these areas around the world, and saying, hey, this is the thing that's affecting this area the most. In this case, the outbreak of monkeypox in the area. Looking at it from a more holistic standpoint, I can look at everything that's happening across a location, and then just filter down to those things that I worry about the most. In this case, I'm just looking at the health events. What you'll see is I'm pulling back all the different health events that are happening here, the disease outbreak, and showing how those are affecting this risk and stability level for every place. Again, in this case, in southern India, if I can go anywhere around the globe and get the same level of information automatically written into a risk report and showing how those things change the risk levels over time. We've done this, we've done the really how things started with the outbreak of COVID in the United States. And the last example I wanted to show is a specialized dashboard that we created for COVID risk understanding, really that's still active today, that has been running for the last few years, really showing the, the outbreak and impact of COVID around the world. Thanks for your time. Would love to be able to talk to you in the future about applications for health issues, but in general, how we look at health and risk, or excuse me, threat and risk information.
Awesome. Thank you, John from Geospark. And so then third, we have our next presentation, which is going to be from Fraym, and it is AI generated population data for enhanced decision making.
Thank you all for taking the time today. I'm Catherine Wynn. I'm an associate on the growth team at Fraym, and we're a small business based in Arlington, Virginia. And we're using AI to map humanity to enhance decision-making within the US government and partners globally. So without an application of AI like ours, there's no comprehensive, accurate, and localized source of data on human populations. So typically, decision makers turn to national statistics for answers to complex questions like the economic impact of COVID-19. So for example, we know that in India, the country's GDP shrank by 12% at the height of the pandemic. But what about economic impacts on individual communities, on women, young people, smallholder farmers? How do we begin to understand the disproportionate impacts beyond one or two national data points? And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation turned to Fraym to answer this question with neighborhood level resolution. So here we can see that closing public markets affected women more than men, meaning more women were unable to make a living during the pandemic in Mumbai. And Fraym gives users the ability to zoom in on any community and know who lives there, what they think, and how they behave. So for example, we developed neighborhood level data on attitudes towards COVID-19 vaccines for Johnson & Johnson's global health team. Data such as this map of unvaccinated people and their level of skepticism towards any COVID vaccine demonstrates the kind of local data Fraym is capable of producing for nearly any country in the world, helping public health agencies understand who's getting vaccinated, who isn't, and what we can do to change it. And this type of community level human-centric data holds powerful implications for strategies to expand access to services. In Papua New Guinea, we're currently working with the US Agency for International Development to efficiently, sustainably, and equitably expand electricity access with multiple infrastructure approaches. The result is a comprehensive national picture of expansion with neighborhood level precision for the public sector and private sector companies to identify which communities are ready for grid expansion, in need of mini grid installations, and which communities would benefit most from solar home systems. The rising impacts of climate change will only augment this need for local data. Understanding the myriad of conditions that contribute to vulnerability are challenging and essential to target investment where it's needed most. In Maputo, Fraym worked with the municipal government to produce a prioritization tool, the Disadvantaged Neighborhood Vulnerability Score, that quantifies and identifies informal settlements most in need based on their climate vulnerability, their poverty, and their access to infrastructure. With a local level holistic portrait of vulnerability, the municipality was able to allocate limited resources with high impact. The data driving these insights are high resolution and highly reliable. To create its product, Fraym combines household level survey data with remote sensing data using a series of AI models. Scientifically sampled, geotagged household level surveys are Fraym's primary source of training data, which we acquire through local partnerships, commissioning data collection, or curating traditional semi-public household surveys. This training data source is distinct from any open data product available, such as social media scraping, and requires significant investment in data aggregation and collection. With training data acquired, cleaned, and vetted, Fraym uses a model stacking AI approach to predict a continuous surface of the indicator of interest at a 1 square kilometer resolution. The resulting model is used to predict the survey data for all non-enumerated areas, which Fraym tunes and validates using industry standard cross-validation techniques and model diagnostics. Our novel data product offers an unprecedented level of geospatial precision, a high level of rigor and confidence, and can be available for nearly any country of interest to USG civilian agencies. With Fraym, now you can understand populations with geographic precision that was previously impossible. Even in challenging environments, Fraym data is reliable, leveraging professionally enumerated survey data and AI methodology rooted in academic research. We've informed over $40 billion in programmatic and operational missions across sectors, including global health, security, energy, gender equality, and more. And we look forward to expanding. So thanks for taking the time. Don't hesitate to contact me. My email's right here.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you for your lightning talk. And so then to close out the space and global data category and to close out today's industry presentations, we have a final lightning talk from Farmbeats from Microsoft.
Hi, I'm Riaz Kishore. I'm a program manager in Microsoft. So I'm gonna sort of just go through, before I go, I'll share a video. So let's go through the recording and then I'll talk through some of the slides afterwards.
The world has a food problem, but it is not just about growing food. We need to grow good food, nutritious food, and we need to grow that food without harming the planet. One of the most promising ways to address that problem is that of data-driven agriculture. That is, if you could capture data from the farm, from different parts of the farm, and then use artificial intelligence on top of that data to add value, to be able to predict things that you otherwise cannot sense, cannot measure, you can then use that to improve efficiencies in agriculture.
My name's Andrew Nelson. I'm a 5th generation farmer in Eastern Washington. We farm about 8,000 acres.
So one of the biggest challenges with deploying IoT systems in remote locations is the lack of connectivity. So even if you go out and deploy sensors in a farm field, you need a way to get all that data to the cloud. We're able to bridge that gap by using TV white spaces. TV white spaces are unused TV spectrum, and they're really great when it comes to the agriculture scenario because they can travel very long distances. So what we've done as part of the Farmbeats project is create this end-to-end IoT system that actually uses TV white spaces to both enable connectivity and also send sensor data to the cloud.
In order to enable precision agriculture, a farmer needs to know what the farm looks like. Not just what's above the soil, also what's below the soil. One way to create that view is if you can bring data from sensors, if you can bring data from satellite imagery, from drone imagery, using artificial intelligence and computer vision techniques, you can merge all of these different data streams to create views of the farm that you otherwise just couldn't get.
With one drone flight, we can generate 15 to 20 gigabytes worth of data. And we're able to see the data that comes back immediately. I'm starting to have self-reinforcing loops. I can take a drone flight, it'll inform my spray decision, which I can then see results from my weather station in the field. And I can manage my field in a much more granular approach. I'm going from managing things field by field to managing it acre by acre or even in smaller increments.
The supply chain industry and the wind and solar energy producers would love to know, what the solar predictions or the wind predictions would be, where some of the microclimate predictions could sort of help them solve that problem.
These are all fundamental computer science challenges where we as computer scientists need to work together with the other scientists in the space. So technology can help with climate adaptation. And technology can also help with agriculture becoming a solution to this problem. But we are confident using some of the technologies that we are building that we will be able to overcome this challenge.
So to make data-driven agriculture a reality, we need to break the data silos and get data into a standard-driven, cohesive, analysis-ready form. And that's where, Farmbeats platform enables to sort of get the various sources of data, ground truth from the farm to macro information like weather, satellite information, to make AI more accessible and enable this different data sources to sort of be able to use to create AI models to solve some of the problems. And so just to sort of give an example, some of the example challenges and how, we've sort of looked at solving those problems. And so for example, you have one of the challenges is these different data sets could be different resolution, like satellite imagery, maybe once a day, weather information, maybe every few minutes. How do you merge them together to get insights like heat maps, boundaries, or even other time series parameters from this information? Or the other challenge is, you get weather forecast, but you get weather forecast for an area, for a region, right? Not a weather forecast for a particular point in the area. And especially in agriculture, knowing weather forecast at the farm is more important in terms of making planning decisions in the next couple of days. So being able to take sensor data fused with weather forecast to create a more precise climate prediction on the farm is very, very useful. Similarly, satellite imagery is a lot of times it's sparse and it's cloudy, right? You have 70% of the planet sort of covered with clouds. So given those conditions, how do you sort of generate a daily, like a cloud-free image so you can start analyzing some of the information from the location. Plus, labeled data sets is also hard to get in the satellite imagery, right? So you have maybe some low-res labeled data set, but not labeled data set for all the various resolutions of different satellite imagery that is available. So how do you sort of take a high-resolution imagery, merge them to using AI techniques like neural net to create a high resolution labeled data set. Similarly, taking either drone imagery or satellite information, merging them with the sensor data on the ground, you can create like soil moisture or weed map or fertilizer map, which can then be used more to create precise precision map, and even only fertilize or put weed or chemicals on the pesticides on the places where there are weeds. So these are sort of the enablers of sort of getting more precision agriculture, or even identifying using imagery to figure out what sort of conservation practices are used by a farm, or those enables to sort of towards more sustainable practices in the agricultural space. Or once you take a lot of this data together, you can use process models like COMET or DNDC to figure out what the carbon estimates on the farm would be. But a lot of this information requires is a lot of historical data that is needed to compute in these process models. So some of that could be automated using AI models, leveraging satellite imagery, drone imagery, sensor information to create those identifying those input parameters, or even creating heat maps for getting a better carbon estimates. And if you can do these things, then you can also do like a what if for future scenarios, where saying, what if I follow certain practices? How does my carbon estimates change on the farm? So these are all different use cases, and there are a lot more you can unlock by using data sets once you have got them together in a way that you can process and build AI models on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Riaz, and thank you to all of our presenters in this category. And so now we have about 10 minutes for question and answers. And so to kick us off with the Q&A, I'll pass it over to Ron Williams to start.
I'm so excited about this this section, space and global data, and thinking about, JWST has successfully launched and is out there taking pictures, and we were getting those back just a couple weeks ago. It's awesome. I love science and tech. So a question I have maybe for Planet is, how can the Planet constellation data that's being collected be combined with other satellite constellations such as Maxar's worldview, and are there benefits of doing that?
Absolutely. So we see a lot of folks combining our data with things like Worldview, Sentinel, Landsat, and each of the data sources provide a different strength so that when you use them together, it's actually better than the sum of all of its parts. So using something like Worldview, you can take a higher resolution look at maybe anomalies or infrastructure that you might see at the PlanetScope resolution, but you just need to see a little bit higher. Or you can run a machine learning model where you kind of train it to see, okay, something that looks like this at Maxar resolution looks like this in PlanetScope resolution. Now let's run that over a broader area because we have that global coverage with PlanetScope, whereas something like Worldview is more postage stamp at high resolution. And then if you combine it with something like Landsat or Sentinel, you've got the added aspect of, maybe incorporating different spectral bands, or maybe being able to fill in gaps here and there because it might have been cloudy when one satellite flew over, but not the next. So it's a really great way to fuse all these data sets together to use them for the best parts of all of them.
And more on like the cleaning up of the data and examples where like cloud cover is impacting the ability to get a certain resolution or even visibility into an area. Are the space science companies exploring the use of like GPU AI image cleaning up, I guess, or denoising of the imagery that's coming back, and using that to make it possible to maybe extract information that previously we couldn't, or what? How are how's the GPU type AI post processing helping the planetary data collection?
So we are seeing people use like something we're doing at Planet, it's called Fusion, where we combine Landsat, Sentinel, and PlanetScope data. And from that, we can create a cloud-free, gap-free mosaic for every single day. And that way you have a little bit of interpolation combined with all these different data sets. And it's something that I'm seeing growing in the science community in general. There are lots of people fusing different data sets together. Bringing in SAR now is something that's becoming really popular to try and bring in the benefits of that on top of optical data. So I think that we're going to see a lot of growth in that region to see what can you do in the realm of synthetic data, like you're saying.
Help me out, and our audience saw.
I'll add one more.
What is that? Sure, let's give Tanya a chance to answer that question that I had, just for clarification. The question was, what is SAR for our audience?
Oh, sorry, synthetic aperture radar.
Thank you. Go ahead, Riaz.
So yeah, I was just going to say, right, like one of the slides that I showed about, cloud-free daily generated data, that was actually using the SAR imagery from Sentinel-1, fusing with Sentinel-2 imagery, which is a RGB, and that allows you to sort of create a daily cloud-free. The SAR, the synthetic aperture radar, is more a RF signal reflection from the ground, right? So it doesn't get blocked by the cloud. So you can use that information to sort of recreate what's below the cloud to get the imagery that is missing.
Thank you, Riaz. I had a question for Fraym. I know it was answered in the chat. I was just a little bit curious about with that example of population and maybe even sentiment that's happening on a global scale. Can you give some examples of the data collection techniques and sources that allow you to get to that resolution, and then maybe some of the AI safety and ethical considerations on the collection of and use of that data within your?
Sure. So the data that we're collecting as to serve as training data for our AI is not 1 square kilometer resolution. The output is 1 square kilometer resolution, but we're only able to achieve that with AI. But to get into the data sources, on the household survey data side, because we have 2 chunks of inputs, one on like people and then one on environments. So on the people side, those are professionally enumerated household surveys. So those can be either through USAID or World Bank or the Gates Foundation, or they can be surveys that we've commissioned ourselves through market-based research firms. And those can be mobile phone surveys or telephone surveys, computer surveys, different formats. And then those environmental indicators are drawn from remotely sensed data, Earth observation data, things like that on the environments. And so when we're getting into ethics for our data source, we have several vetting processes for each new data set that we input into our models. So that involves just protecting microdata, so the locations of individuals who are responding. That's especially important when we're talking about things like HIV or different health concerns. And then just making sure that the questions we're asking don't put anyone in any kind of danger.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Just for folks' awareness, you're definitely welcome to drop any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll surface them on the call. Just curious, Sabrina, how are we doing on time?
We are doing fantastic on time. We have about 3 more minutes for questions that folks might have. And also, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand with the Zoom raise hand question function as well. But we have 3 minutes for questions.
I'll go ahead with more. I'm curious, thinking about some of the satellite imagery use cases, and knowing that right now there's limitations between the different satellite vendors and satellite data products because of the resolution of the satellites themselves. What do you predict maybe that would be possible in the future, both in the AI space and informing, you know, better public policy or better decision making or even disaster response that maybe isn't possible today, but could be possible in the future as we see increased resolution and even increased refresh rates? That's hopefully to Planet, to Tanya, if you're willing to take it. Sorry.
I was thinking it's such a broad question where to start. I think really making that jump, the thing that we're going to get from machine learning is making the jump between, you know, what insights are you getting out of the data? And then how do you take that and turn it into something like a report that you can deliver to somebody to actually take the action on it? There are some places that are making those connections in certain areas right now, agriculture obviously being a big one, but places I think that are not traditionally utilizing satellite imagery or space-based data in general. I think trying to connect all of those points to show how this data can benefit other sectors is going to be really critical. And there are probably a lot of ways that it can be used, and we just haven't thought of it yet. So I think that's where the future is really going to lie, is figuring out what other sectors we can be benefiting with this type of data.
Yeah, what about for Geospark? Where do you see, you know, as you can get additional data and detections, and of course you're scraping public information as well as I'm sure other types of data, where do you predict that you may be able to identify threats and things like that?
That's great. And I'm actually going to go back to also at the end of this, if I have a moment, to talk about the satellite piece. So where we're driving our technology is we're 100% machine driven, artificial intelligence driven. We've actually developed a partnership recently with a company called Control Risk that does very similar things, but all human analytics driven. We brought initially integrating our data together. And now what we're working on is really the symbiotic relationship between people and machines, where the analysts will help train constantly train our algorithms with the events they're detecting and the analysis that they're writing from an expertise piece, so that the systems can go out and analyze the globe in real time. And really driving faster, more accurate understanding of threat and risk assessments, globally. One of the things that we've actually done some partnerships on with some satellite organizations is automated tipping and queuing. So a different way maybe to answer your questions about satellite isn't just where the satellites are going, but how you tie different forms of artificial intelligence together that we're all working on here to come up with a net result that's better than individual. So we've done some things where we've taken our algorithms, plugged them into satellite tasking capabilities for those companies, and automatically driving collection based on the events that are happening around the globe, so that they can do post-processing to understand it from an imagery standpoint as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron, for leading question and answer here. And thank you so much to all 4 of our industry presenters, Planet, Geospark, Fraym, and Microsoft, for coming to talk about your applications. So this concludes our 5th and final segment for our industry presentations. And so now we're just going to recollect and transition to the last portion of today's industry day, which is going to be going into next steps and a conclusion, kudos, and what to expect next. And so I'll pass it to Ron, who is going to be talking through all of this. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sabrina. Thank you, Sabrina, for helping us through today. You've been a great host and, of course, a huge help in making this industry day possible. A few takeaways and next steps for our federal agencies that are attending today. We're encouraging agencies to consider how they can apply AI to improve their agency's mission delivery. And as this was a competitive process for the Applied AI Challenge, agencies looking to use any of the tools shared today are invited to work with us to simplify and streamline their acquisition. So you can contact me by email for details. And if your agency chooses to move forward with one of these AI technologies, we'd love to hear from your team to understand how your deployment went and share that experience across the federal government. It's really important that we learn from each other, share these examples, share these success stories, and even pitfalls and failures, and make sure that we're moving the federal government forward for the good of the American people. In moving forward over the next month in August, we'll publish the lightning talks shared today. We'll do a little bit of editing, clean them up, and make them available for folks to review them into the future and share them amongst the federal community. And then we'll also be selecting the winners of the challenge based on the presentations today. So we're really excited to wrap up this challenge. It was definitely a huge effort from many folks to make it happen. And then we're continuing to, in the long-term vision, looking at AI and advancing technology in the federal government, we're continuing to bring together and share information with the federal AI community. So after this challenge concludes, we'll be publishing future prize program opportunities on the challenge.gov website. There are also other agencies that are using challenge.gov for their initiatives as well. So check them out. We also welcome and encourage our federal employees, contractors, and affiliates, anyone with a .gov and .mil email account, to join the AI Community of Practice mailing list. And that's on the screen and also in the chat. I think my email is also in the chat for agencies looking to acquire. I want to thank the folks here today for coming. I have some kudos for folks at a high level, our collaborators across the agencies at GSA Technology Transformation Service, Lynn Parker and her team at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, our evaluation committee, which largely was from the Presidential Innovation Fellows, Dan Nicotera from our Office of General Counsel, and Melissa Markovitz from Office of Acquisition. Without them, we would not be able to actually use this for acquisition authority and streamline actually getting these products into federal agencies. That's a big deal. Our communications team with Matt Gallant and Matthew Burrell, and then of course the challenge.gov platform with Jeremy Adar. She was very helpful in shaping the challenge to bring the most value to the federal agencies, but also to make it interesting for the companies that participated today, because there's no point in having an event if we can't bring these interesting and good technologies to the forefront. Thank you so much for the submitters and the folks that presented today. Our industry trade groups like ATARC, NVIDIA, Inception Program, the Tradewin Group, Captivate for helping us produce this event, as well as Anna Ruth, Bruna, and Daniela from the Clearing. And last but not least, the AI community of practice leaders. So Eric and Sabrina, thank you so much for believing in this event and believing that we could get an AI challenge put out from the very beginning, and the active development, promotion of the challenge, and actually getting us over the finish line. I am so grateful to have a team to bring this event to the federal community today.
Just one quick point on that. Thank you so much for Ron for leading this, championing our challenge. It's our first one, and we are very excited to have this be the first of many in the future. On that point, in order to make that into a reality, we really need feedback from folks. And so we have a quick feedback survey. Bruna dropped the link into the chat. If you wouldn't mind, please just take a couple of minutes and complete our feedback survey so that we can better understand how to keep this going and improve it in the future.